So in terms of first kicking off here, I'm sure many of you are familiar with your current annual planning process. Maybe you're updating that process. And a lot of that's probably very similar for most organizations. You're pulling together all your planned projects, your in-flight projects, and from there you're going through a process to prioritize, rank those, budget those, get those then reviewed and approved from the governance committee. You might go through multiple iterations, and then gonna update and finalize your overall plan for the year. Typically, we see a good opportunity with ServiceNow is what are the inputs? Where do those project ideas, where do those demands come from? And so on the platform, you can manage your product portfolio. So as you're assessing your product portfolio, you're assessing your new strategies for the year. That might change. You might need to implement new products. So we know this year's been a big shift for many industries. So maybe you all of a sudden had to do more online conferencing solutions or more telemedicine. So they might require a lot of additional products. Also, from a services perspective, as you know, you can manage your services, an email service as an example, but you can actually start managing those services, budgeting those services, looking at costs of those services. So that will give you insights into areas to continue to invest, to optimize, and or to add new services. Same thing with an application portfolio. So within the platform, you can manage your application portfolio. You can look at total cost of ownership. You can look at how those applications support your different compliance requirements, and really kind of look at where do we need to invest, sunset, or retire different applications, which is going to generate new projects, new investments. And then from a technology perspective, you can also then look at your technology platforms, which platforms need to be upgraded, which technology platforms are you going to be migrating to. That's also going to generate needs for investments as part of your annual planning process. So this here is kind of a high-level summary of that strategic annual planning process. But the thing I wanted to highlight here is how you can manage those inputs that are going to drive those new investments that you need to plan and budget for. But here, from an operational perspective, this typically is something done in conjunction with finance. But on the platform, there's some opportunities here to give some of the inputs and to start doing some of the budgeting here at obviously for operational projects, but also you could start budgeting, say, for assets or other entities on the platform. One key thing to highlight here, and we highlight this in our training sessions, is around the whole idea of service units. So typically what we see in IT, there's always the idea that we need to do more with less, but I actually like to turn that around and say we actually want to do more with the same. As we know, every year we invest in new technologies, new products, new applications. That's going to drive additional transactions. So those increases in transactions might also increase the number of applications we need to support, the number of servers. So if we can track all those service units, forecast those, and that can be coming from our CMDB as part of our configuration items as one example. And we can start then to track that forecast, that increase. So then we can start to demonstrate to executives and others that we can still support that increase because we've invested in process improvements, we've invested in automation solutions, automated workflows. So we can now actually support that increase of additional servers we need to support, additional transactions. So we can actually do more with the same. And so that can really highlight just the additional value of the ongoing investments, both on the strategic side that would generate those automations, as well as here looking at your operational portfolio and operational budgets. So something key to think about if that's something that you're doing today, or that might be an opportunity to start tracking and forecasting those items as an input into your operational budgets. Next, if we're kind of bring it together so we can start looking at our strategic and our operational budgets. We can start that evaluation process when we're looking at new strategic initiatives, taking into account those different portfolios that are driving the inputs there, such as the application portfolio. Then on the operational side, as we just mentioned, looking at some of those service unit forecasts and helping that to drive our needs from an operational perspective. And then being able to have a view potentially across both items all in the platform. So depending on how you're managing those items, that's an opportunity. So that kind of gives you a high-level summary. I'm assuming many of you are following those similar processes today. So what we're going to highlight next is the different ServiceNow solutions that can assist you in your annual planning process. I'd also say that we're seeing a lot of organizations, yes, they still do annual planning, but we're seeing more and more it's quarterly planning. Some are actually looking at monthly planning. As we know, technology changes, or we might have these unforeseen pandemics that hit us and we totally have to shift. So we're seeing more of the quarterly planning process with organizations. So next, I wanted to kind of just give a brief overview. A lot of times we receive questions from customers on the different financial management solutions on the ServiceNow platform, and kind of give you an idea of what those different solutions are for and what their main use case and main purpose. So first down here, those of you that are existing PPM customers would be familiar with the portfolio financial planning. So that's using the Portfolio Workbench. You can do simple as well as advanced planning with your portfolios. And so that's something that we'll be highlighting. There is the financial modeling engine, and so that's another capability. That one is specifically designed for leveraging some of the out-of-the-box cost models, and it's all about helping you manage and track the cost of services, cost of applications, cost of shared services as well. And then a core across the platform capability around cost management. So this is really helping to create managed costs for your configuration items. So that's a core capability regardless of which solution on the platform you're using. So a lot of organizations use that as part of ITSM, but it's a cross-platform capability. So just kind of wanted to provide a little bit of clarity on those different cost and financial management solutions. Here's a little bit more information about those solutions and how you would want to potentially use those in your annual planning or financial planning requirements. So the portfolio financial planning, as I mentioned before, using the Portfolio Workbench. So you've got that simple financial planning and budgeting capability, very, very simple, or you have the more advanced portfolio planning where you can put together budgets and forecasted plans. So that's an area that we'll highlight today. Next, there's the brand new solution called Portfolio Planning Workbench. They're calling the application scenario planning. So those of you that are currently on New York, you can actually find that on the ServiceNow store, and you can install that. It's also compatible with Orlando as well. My understanding is it'll be as part of the Paris release, but they're starting to release applications that you can get access to in advance of the formal release cycles. So that gives you the ability to put together multiple scenario comparisons versus the Portfolio Workbench. You're just looking at one scenario comparison. There's the financial modeling, which I just talked about. That's where you can really set up your different cost models. It's really meant to be pretty prescriptive models that they've set up. So you can look at your cost of services, your applications, and be able to then start understanding the costs for each one of those entities. And then, as we mentioned, you've got the cost management across the platform. So say an example, with the app portfolio management solution within ServiceNow, it's going to use the components of cost management and financial modeling to pull together your application TCO, and a lot of the detailed costs and such as usage and assets and things of that nature will be coming from the cost management portion of the solution. So different sets of solutions, but you can start bringing those all together for a full rich story around managing your financials. Next, I want to go in and kind of give you a brief overview on the portfolio financial planning. So many of you that are probably using the Portfolio Workbench today. So using the simple portfolio planning, very simple. You create your portfolio. When you go into the workbench, you select which fiscal year you're looking for. You set a target. This is really just identifying what's my high-level budget. That's the extent of the financial planning, if you will, at the simple portfolio. And then you would go in and select your different demands and projects as part of your scenario. So this is part of the Portfolio Workbench. When you're in the actual workbench itself, then you'll be able to look at all of your selected demands and projects. How does that parlay up against the overall budget target that you've set with your portfolio? You can start to get some visualization here across your different resource plans as well. One thing to highlight here is the demands and projects that will be included in your portfolio workbench for the selected fiscal year are those demands and projects that actually have a cost plan or a resource plan within that fiscal year. So projects and demands that don't have resource plans or cost plans within that fiscal year will not show up on the portfolio workbench. Then if we wanted to look at the advanced portfolio planning, so this is where we get into more detailed budgeting and forecasting. So it's still complete the first two steps here, and then we would come into step 3 and step 4 to really look at budgeting, establishing portfolio budgets, individual budget items, and then from there creating our individual forecasts. So here I'm kind of looking at selecting the portfolio budget plan. And what we see here is we've got our portfolio and we've got our individual, what I call budget items or portfolio tasks. So each one of these tasks typically relates to and is linked to a demand or project. You can tie those to other entities on the platform as well. But here in the portfolio workbench, it's pretty centric around using your demands as well as your projects. You could use just the kind of standalone financial planning workbench for other items, but we'll kind of highlight how that ties together when we get into the demonstration. Here's the forecast, so you can set up a forecast here as well related to your portfolio planning. Here, as part of that advanced portfolio planning, relates to the actual financial planning, which is behind the scenes. So here I would have our different portfolios. Here we're having all those individual portfolio tasks that we saw within the portfolio workbench. But here we can manage our actual budget tasks. So if we need to create a budget for each portfolio, we can have those tasks and manage those tasks. Here we're looking at the plan view. Then we can actually look at the status of the different budgets and getting those approved. If we look at it here from the visual taskboard view, so we can see our different portfolios and we can kind of see the status of those associated budgets and where they are from an approval process. So that's how you start to blend together the portfolio workbench with the financial planning workbench. So that's a combination there assists in really providing the capabilities for that advanced financial planning and budgeting as part of the portfolio workbench. Next here we're looking at the 2 new solutions, 2 new applications that are available. There's strategic sprint tracking for PPM, maybe not necessarily needed for annual planning, but definitely something that you could use to highlight, here's our plan of projects, and here's how they align to the strategic goals and objectives of the organization. So it can really be a powerful way to present the information based upon your planned set of investments, say for the year. Next, we've got the scenario planning, which is that it's called the Portfolio Planning Workbench. It doesn't have the detailed advanced budgeting, but it does have multiple scenarios. and additional information to be able to track the progress of those of your confirmed scenario as an example. So I'm going to give you a brief overview here with the strategic spend solution. This is where you can go into each one of your demands and projects. You can align them to strategies and goals like you could previously, but now you could actually allocate a percentage of that demand or project to the achievement of one of those strategies or goals. So you can do that at the demand or project level. And also then you can have a dashboard that kind of gives you that visualization, so you understand across all demands and projects what's the alignment to the different goals or strategies for the organization. So for example here, if we look at the strategic spend, here I'm in a specific project, then we actually have at the bottom of that, there's some related lists. So you'll see a strategy allocation related list, a goal allocation related list. And so you'll be able to look at that. Once you click into that, it's going to show you all projects, including the project you're currently on, and demands, and see their overall allocation for this particular strategic objective in this example, or you would be looking at it from an overall goal perspective. You can, they have out of the box, so you can recalculate your strategy and goal allocations, which will recalculate the financial values. Then you can actually, there's scheduled jobs to complete all of the updates to your cost fields. So that's kind of a high-level summary of what you set up so that you can have your actual visualizations in the dashboard. So here is the out-of-the-box dashboards with this application. So we've got the strategy overview and the strategy details, the goal overview, and the goal details. And so we look at the number of projects here that are aligned, the overall benefit, the actuals associated with those. Some high-level information that we can look at tied to this different strategies and goals in the organization. So really key just to make sure that what you're investing in is aligned with the desired outcomes of the organization. Next here, if I were to drill into one of those views there on the out-of-the-box dashboard, so it's similar to the PMO dashboard that's tied into performance analytics. So here we would be able to see the analytics hub and be able to see the breakdown of those planned costs for that particular goal or strategy, and we'd be able to then see that here across the different projects that have aligned to that specific strategy or goal. So we'll get into that briefly in the demonstration. Next is the scenario planning solution. So this really just gives you, I shouldn't say just, it's a really good, great capability here. Now you can manage multiple scenarios. You can select one that's going to be your confirmed or approved scenario, but then you can really create and manage multiple scenarios. You can also track performance. So it actually starts to show information about the actuals there as well. So some nice capabilities here with the scenario planning. So here, if we come in and look at this solution, very similar to what the Portfolio Workbench has, but it's focusing on multiple scenarios. So I can see here briefly that I got selected my confirmed plan for FY20. I can see the demands and projects here. I've got my other overall scenarios, right? So you could have different scenarios. Maybe you wanted to maximize ROI. Maybe you wanted to maximize your alignment to grow the business strategy objective. As an example, you could add additional comparisons here. So you can create each one of those different scenarios. And then you'll see the roadmap like you've seen before. They've updated the view here. So from an overview perspective, you have additional information. So we get the typical budget versus target here. You've got the number of items that have been selected from your list. You've got your benefit amounts here. You're actually bringing in actuals now, so you can start looking at budget versus actuals here. So some nice visualizations when we're looking at that particular scenario. And then there's other information we can look at from a resource perspective as well. And then last but not least, you can actually start to compare your scenarios at a high level. So here's that high level scenario comparison. So we could look at the different scenarios. It's going to give us information about the budget versus target. We could look at the number of selected projects and demands. We've got the benefit amount here. We have unaligned items. We've got our over allocated groups. So that's nice to look at as well. And then you can actually start toggling over here to the track section, and then we'll be able to really look at the plan versus actual and the allocated versus actual here. It'll also show you the risks and issues and change requests associated with the particular portfolio. So some enhanced capabilities there. Also really nice feature here is I can toggle between different portfolios instead of having to go out and come back in for every single portfolio. So nice feature there as well. And then last but not least, we can look at the KPIs. So just like what you currently have on the program workbench, it's now available here on the portfolio workbench, where we can look at the status and health of the different projects as you're managing those as part of your portfolio. So I'm here in the system. I'm logged in here as Megan Burke, here as a portfolio manager. So many of you that are using the system today know that you can use the out-of-the-box PMO dashboard. So a lot of rich content here, especially with the performance analytics, where I can look at trending information over time. I can obviously filter this by selected portfolios and dynamically kind of look at, say, the health of what's going on with our HR portfolio. So I can not only get our trends, but I can get kind of a slicing and dicing here of our investments in the HR portfolio. I could look at the overall pipeline. So if you're doing ideas, demands, and projects, you'd be able to look at all those. A lot of organizations are just doing demands and projects, so you can remove the idea portions of this and still get the overall trending information about your pipeline around demands and projects. I really like the project health. So those of you who are using this capability really starts to give you a good view of all your core KPIs. You know, the basic KPIs of on time, on budget, but additional KPIs, and I can track and see the overall trend over time. So in this case, we're looking at the HR portfolio and looking at that overall trend. But I could compare that with the overall view across the enterprise and see how we compare with some of those overall KPIs. The data quality here is really just helping you track to see if there's missing data or data that hasn't been filled in across your demands and projects information here as well. So from a time perspective, I'm going to jump over into the portfolio capabilities. So what we're talking about here for your portfolio planning is that we're making the assumption that you've already created your demands, those project proposals. You've also created in-flight projects or planned projects as well. So if I want to go in here and look at the HR portfolio, so this is the current portfolio workbench some of you might have already been using today. So as we mentioned, there's two levels of planning here. There's a simple approach. So this is where we would identify an overall target. So you're just identifying what your target is here. We can obviously come in here and update that, and we can save that target. Next, here we would come in and select our different demands. So this is where we would come in and typically do our scenario analysis. So we could see all of our demands and projects for this fiscal year that have resource plans and have cost plans associated with those. We can also show different data elements here, so we can add additional columns in here. So these are the out-of-the-box columns that are available to be displayed here. We could move and show more of the columns versus the Gantt chart. We could also use this here to filter and sort by priority. You can actually create your own ranking from 1 to 10 as an example, or we can look at our overall Gantt chart. Also, what I like to do here is if you're doing some of that sensitivity analysis, put the auto refresh on, and then when you're coming over here and looking at adding in additional projects or demands, by selecting those, we will get an immediate update in terms of what it's going to cost, as well as our resource constraints there. So we can see how the budget changes, as well as our resource capacity and the resource demands. So that's a core capability here of selecting those demands that you'd like to use. Also, what you can do, and you can set this up, there's a couple of settings as well as configuration you can do. So if you wanted to say confirm, and various of these are demands. So typically, like you've got some here are demands, such as the ones here in purple. You could actually use the confirm to approve those demands and have it create a project from that. So that's also available. Also, when you're doing your analysis here, you could change the dates. So change the dates of those demands, move those forward or back, and then see what the impact would be on your costs. So you can do that prior to doing your confirmation as well. So it's a nice set of capabilities that you can manage here in the Portfolio Workbench. So this is kind of that simple planning process, and this is where you can select the specific demands and projects to include in your scenario for the year. So that's the simple planning process.
Yeah, John, would this be able to support multi-year planning if you want to do something, 5 years out, or is this just based on, a single fiscal year?
So it's based on fiscal year. You can see here, right? It's all based on fiscal year, but you can support multi-year planning, but you do it by year. So when I come in here to select and set up my portfolio, here I select the actual fiscal year. So when I'm in doing that scenario comparison, I am doing it by year. If you're looking for that multi-year view across, typically we recommend organizations using an investment portal. And so there you can see year over year what your planned costs are based upon a selected set of demands and projects. So say if you identified your scenario here, you identified your demands and projects here, you could then select those demands and projects in your investment portal, and you'd be able to see the planned cost year over year. So the next thing we can look at here is kind of more of the advanced set of planning. So you can do the simple set of planning. Now for the budgeting, there's, you actually create budgets. You can have those budget tasks be created. Those can go through an approval process, and you can iterate and promote additional budgets. So you can take it to that next level. Same thing down here from a forecasting perspective. So if I were to come in here and look at the budgets here in the Portfolio Workbench, I would see that particular portfolio. Here, then I see the individual portfolio tasks. These budget items are tied to a general ledger account number. That account number then is tied to a specific demand or a project. The general ledger account numbers obviously report with a specific expense type. Trying to toggle over here. So that's how you can kind of manage that here. We can look at this from an overall annual perspective here, so we can view that information. The other way to look at this is if we go in and look at it from a form perspective, that I've got all these individual budget items. So each one of these items is called a budget item or plan item here. And so we can see here's in the overall plan version that we have, but it's made up of these individual budget items. So to do the advanced, you'll set up individual budget items. And so if we were to go in and say create a new item, we would come in here, we would select the different general ledger account number that this might be associated with, or we put the dates associated with this. We could identify the plan type. So here you'll notice we have things that you can actually use outside of an overall project, but you can identify the plan type, labor, you would select the different individuals that would be included, software, hardware, how to tie it here to my configurations items here on the platform. But the key thing you'll be doing is tying it to the actual task. So this is typically where you tie that to the demand or project related to this particular budget item. So that's how you would go in and create your individual budget items. So if we go back in to that, we come back down into the budgeting. This then shows us all of those budget items that we've already set up. So we can go in and look at a particular item here. So we can see the overall start date here. We can see this is not using really a plan type. It's tied to a specific project associated with this. And so that's how we've included that as part of the overall budget. So that's how you kind of go in and set up these individual budgets as part of advanced planning. And then you would also be able to manage that in the actual financial planning workbench. So if we went to the financial planning workbench, here we can see the individual plans that we're working on. The one that we were looking at earlier is the HR plan. So this is that overall budget task here that's being managed. We can see that we're still working the plan in that budget, so it still needs to be approved. We can come over here and look at the plan detail, and this is basically going to be what we saw there in the portfolio workbench. So you do a lot of your work here in creating that. You can also do it in the portfolio workbench. So it kind of gives you a combination of doing those two items as part of that advanced planning. So next, we wanted to go in and highlight the new capability, and we'll start off here with the new capability around the Portfolio Planning Workbench, which the application that they're calling that on the ServiceNow store is the scenario planning. So if we go look at the Portfolio Planning Workbench, so this is like the slides we were highlighting before. So this is really just managing that simple type of planning, right? So you can come in here and I edit the target slightly differently than before, but I can edit here from the actual page. And here I can actually toggle over two different portfolios. So nice, easy way to manage. We can then see here from that HR portfolio, we can see that this is the confirmed plan that we have. So everything's been confirmed or selected or non-selected here. We have some of the additional capabilities here. So we've got the budget versus target, which we had with the overall portfolio workbench. But now we're seeing the number of items, the benefit amounts, seeing the actuals here with that. We could toggle this over to CapEx and OpEx so we could see what portion is CapEx or OpEx. We can also then toggle over here and get similar views that you have in the portfolio workbench today to look at utilization here from a resource perspective. But what we can do now is we can actually add additional scenarios. So here's some additional scenarios we have for this portfolio. So in this case, we're looking at optimizing ROI. So we've selected potential projects and demands so that we can really try to optimize ROI. We've got another one here so we've put together to really focus on growing the business. So this will be tied to different strategies that we want to look at accomplishing with our investments. So we can do that over here. We can come over and look at one that we want to say maximize our budget. In this case, we haven't selected anything yet, but we could add in a budget column here and start looking at our selections here as well. If we were to look at adding a new scenario, very easy to add a new scenario. So say we wanted to optimize resource availability. Right, so you can really name whatever type of scenario you're looking for. And then you can select which particular scenario and selections you want to include. So we could say, let's go and really assess a different version of our confirmed plan. So it's going to bring everything in. It's pre-selected the ones that was in the confirmed plan. So we could look at that. We might want to come over here. Essentially want to look at resources. We could come in here and look at planned person days. As an example, we could look at allocated hours in here as an example. So maybe those things that we wanted to look at. We can look at those allocated hours, planned hours in here as we're making our decisions. We can remove different other columns as we're doing our analysis here. We can move it back here to look at our overall timeline. So same thing here, right? We can select all or select none. Here there's not the real-time option, but here we can come in here and say we selected everything in here. Then we would do refresh. So that's going to refresh the details associated with that scenario. So now it's going to show us if we selected everything. Actually, did that refresh here? So yeah, so now we can see our overall budget here if we were to select everything in this particular case. So a little over our overall $6 million from a budget perspective. And we can see based upon the projects that are in flight, we already have 1.6 million in actuals. So great capability here, allowing you to do those multiple scenarios. And then we can come over here and look at your different scenario comparisons. So here we can look at budget versus targets, the number of selected items, over allocated actuals. So we can look at actuals as well. This is important, kind of looking at actuals for unselected projects. So we haven't selected those, but we've already spent money on those. Is that the wisest thing? Or, yeah, we need to stop those investments because they're no longer tied to our current strategy. We no longer need to do those products that are face-to-face products. We need to focus on more online digital products this year. So it gives you some good insights there as you're looking at your portfolio. And next here we can come at looking at tracking here. So this is where we can come in and see based upon our different projects, we can see the overall health. Here we can start to see the trend of the planned versus actual, both from a cost perspective, and then we'll see the resource allocations. Then down below here, we can really look at the risks, the issues that we have across the portfolio. Same thing here, cost perspective. So some nice capabilities here in this new solution. So it's called Scenario Planning. You can find that on the ServiceNow store. You can download that. It's compatible with New York and Orlando versions. So a great solution there. This one really doesn't require much setup. You just need to install it and you can start using the workbench. So the next thing I wanted to highlight is the new kind of strategic spend tracking. So say you've went through your annual planning process, you've selected your different projects, you wanted to come in and kind of see how they all align to your different strategies. I'll walk you through how you do that alignment to have it show up here in the out-of-the-box dashboards, but just to give you a high-level overview here from the out-of-the-box dashboards. So here we can look at aligned or unaligned. We can obviously drill into those. We can look at our planned costs here. We can also then go in and look at the strategy details. So we can kind of look at the cost, the benefit here. In this case, we could come in and select the different strategies. So we can slice and dice it based upon our different strategies that we have across the organization. So we can look at a specific strategy and see what the investments are for a specific strategy. In this case, we're looking at all. Similar type of visualizations here in the dashboard from a goal perspective. So we can look at alignment to goals, as well as then looking at the goal details with those. So got that same type of visualizations here in the dashboard. right? So I can drill into these items and kind of get to the analytics hub and kind of see the details for each one of those particular. So this is here the number of projects that align to the goals, right? So we can view that. We can then look at the actual projects themselves and see all the projects here that are aligned to the different goals. You'll see here that we'll see all the projects, we'll see the strategies, we'll see the goals that they're aligned to here. So some good visibility to be able to kind of track and make sure your investments are in sync with the objectives of the organization. So the next thing I wanted to highlight is how do you get that information in? How do you set that up with your different projects? So I'm going to go over here as a project manager. So I'll go in to my project workspace. And I'm going to go into my HR project here. If we go into the details tab, this is where you're really identifying and doing that alignment with your strategies and your goals. So capabilities that you had previously was here out of the box within the business case. You have the strategies and goals that you can relate to. So you can relate each demand and project to those strategic goals. But now, in addition to that, you'll have out of the box the strategic allocations and goal allocations as well that you can have set up here. So I can actually go in and look at a specific strategy in this case, and I can look at all projects. I can actually come in here and reset my allocation here. So they want to make sure that your allocation totals to 100% across your strategies and goals at the project level. But you can see here I could come in and create a new allocation here. I could tie it to a new strategy here, and I could put my overall percentage in here, and so I could add that as one of my related lists below. So I can set that up here at the project or the demand level. I can also then come in here and look at this particular strategy. Here it's going to show me that strategy. It's going to show me all the individual demands and projects that are aligned to that overall strategy. So once you come in and set up and do that alignment with the different strategies or goals and those overall allocations, then you can recalculate that strategy and goal allocation. So you click on the related link and it's going to do that recalculation for you. Also, across the platform, there's a couple of scheduled jobs, and those can be scheduled periodically, and that'll do all the cost field roll-ups based on those allocations for your strategies and your goals. So the end result of managing these strategy allocations and goal allocations at the demand and project level gives us that visibility out of the box. Obviously, you could create additional reporting against that, but I'll just kind of go back and show and end with that new out-of-the-box dashboard. So we can see that dashboard here as it started with before. One thing I'm going to show based on one quick question, and I don't have a lot of time, but I have a few more things to show. Talked a little bit about investment portal as a way to look at year-over-year financials. So we see a lot of organizations using the investment portal as a dynamic way to set with your project review boards. Could be a great way to also interactively discuss what your current plan is for the year. So you can use that as well. And I'm going to go in and just highlight the investment portal. So you can select specific demands and projects. You can do it by program or by portfolio. And it's got these KPI widgets. So these are really powerful. These are out of the box. You can actually, they've set it up so you can configure your own. So here we've got an overview. Any data attributes you want against demand and project you can show here without any coding. You can also, really powerful here, is answer a question, well, how much are we going to spend by strategy? Right, so with one click we can do that. Well, how much of that's going to be by business unit? And we can do that as well and see the different business units. Obviously, in this case, we're looking at everything from an HR lens perspective. You've also got your Gantt chart view, so we can look at demands and projects. We can also look at some of the milestones. Here we're looking at regular milestones and key milestones here. Then from the financials, or questions about kind of year over year. You can do this at the project level and demand level, but here we're doing it across quote unquote portfolio, program, or just a selection of demands and projects. So we can start to see here those overall costs by year. So a really powerful tool here, right? We can continue to slice and dice the information. If we wanted to look at by cost type first versus CapEx and OpEx, we can do that. And then from there, it's going to show me all of our individual cost plans across all the different selected demands and projects. So really powerful here in terms of the investment portal. In terms of next steps and things that you might want to tap into, we have our online public training sessions. So these are 4-hour sessions. It's $400. You can register, pay for those online. So we have a couple of sessions coming up here in July. We have our PPM end-to-end training session. We have our workshop. So this is actually a training session, but it actually steps you through. We give you key starting points. We give you 4 different implementation roadmap templates and walk you through the inputs to that so that you can draft your own implementation roadmap. Same thing here with resource management. We have a 4-hour training on resource management. A lot of our training is not just how the product works, but also how you would implement it. And then we've got our implementation roadmap. So that's where we've got the multiple starting points for resource management. We've got the multiple template roadmaps you can pick from. And then we've got the exercise for you to be able to then create your own roadmap. So we're getting rave reviews, 5 out of 5 stars with customers attending those sessions. So if you're looking for more information, feel free to register to those events. Sean will be giving you more information about that after the training today. In terms of the annual planning, where do we start? What do we need to have in place previously? Typically, this is kind of a typical roadmap. As you saw today, if you're doing your portfolio management, start doing some of that planning or even the financial planning tied to that. Typically, you need to have project management, resource and demand management set up. So typically, organizations will be starting here when they're looking at their annual planning, but obviously requiring the projects and demands would be already set up in the system. Here's an example of one of our template roadmaps here from, so one of those 4 templates. So kind of more of a project-centric starting point in this particular roadmap, and highlighting here into the portfolio management capabilities. So we have different sets of services for organizations. So we have health checks and really deep dive formal roadmaps. So those are also available. Those are 1 to 3 week engagements. We have end-to-end implementations based on those roadmaps we just showed. We also have rapid start. Some organizations are really trying to manage their budget and really get access to core platform capabilities, and a lot of it being out of the box. We have different rapid start packages as well. We do have a guided setup. So some organizations have experienced ServiceNow engineers that like to do the configuration. So there's a lot of nuance with PPM that they don't understand. And so a lot of organizations like having our advisory services where we can help them plan and design how to use PPM and the different modules. We can actually define the stories and then oversee with their team as their team's doing the configuration for the actual implementation. So there's multiple starting points as part of your next steps here. As you're looking at annual planning, we can do a discovery session from there, then kind of give you a recommended approach. We could come in and do a process assessment. We could also come in and look at a health check assessment of where you are today using a solution, give you some recommendation. We have multiple implementation approaches, our end-to-end, our rapid start offerings, or advisory setup. Or you could just jump in immediately to some training sessions. Also the training sessions around your roadmaps, so kind of create your own roadmaps, or we have ongoing managed services as well. And just like to kind of end there and thank everyone for attending our session today. We wish you success with your annual planning journey here.